Thank you everyone for attending our webinar this afternoon. So we're going to be talking about the power of employee resource groups. My name is Christina Giordano and my pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm a partnerships manager here at AllVoices. To give some context around AllVoices, for folks who aren't familiar, we're an employee listening tool used to ensure a culture of trust, inclusion, and transparency for companies around the world. And customers include high-growth companies who really value diversity, equity, and inclusion. And today we're discussing all things ERGs, so developing goals, compensating leaders, to advocating for funds, and measuring the success of these initiatives as well. To give some kind of background and context, Xerox was actually the first company known to implement an employee resource group in 1964, and it was called the National Black Employee Caucus, and ERGs were originally called workplace affinity groups. And one study found that 90% of the Fortune 500 companies offer ERGs to their employees, and 70% of U.S. respondents who are between the ages of 18 to 24 are more likely to apply to a company that has ERGs than not. So with that, I'll stop talking and I'll pass it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. If you could share a little bit about you, the work that you do at your company, and of course, your pronouns will get this conversation started. And I'll pass to you first, Danita.
Well, thank you. I'm Danita Oliver. I am the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program Manager or Leader for RingCentral. I've been working at RingCentral since 2018, and I transitioned into this role just this year, last quarter. And so, well, actually this quarter. And but I'm excited to be here. I have been the co-chair of the Black employees at RingCentral ERG since December 2018. So been doing that for a while and was involved in affinity groups, as you named them, Christina, when I worked for IBM prior to this.
Awesome. Thank you.
I go by she, her, and hers.
Perfect. Dayna.
Thanks, Christina. Hi, everyone. My name is Dayna Wade. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I lead inclusion programs at Blend. We're a technology company. We offer a platform for banks to make lending digital and mobile, and our goal is to provide easy access to financial products. And so as a part of my role as the inclusion programs lead, I program manage our employee resource group program, and I'm happy to be here today to talk about the power of ERGs.
Amazing. Thank you for being here. Imani, I'll pass to you next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Imani Sims. I am a program manager at Zillow Group, which is a housing platform, as you all probably know if you're a renter or looking to buy a house.
And last but not least, Sebastian.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sebastian, also known as Sebas. I'm a customer consultant. Asana is a project management tool. And I also am one of the co-leads of our ERG Blacsana, which is an ERG geared specifically towards our
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for being here and sharing your experience with us this afternoon. Would love to start from the beginning. If you could tell us a little bit about the employee resource groups that are available at your company. And I'm going to start off with Sebastian. I know you mentioned that the ERG that you lead started at the beginning of the year. So if you could talk about kind of how that came to be and like what the inception was, that would be great.
Yeah, totally. And so Asana's had 3 ERGs that started back in 2016. Asana Women, which showcases the work and passion of women in tech. We had Gradient, which honors and celebrates multicultural and like intersectional identities. And we also had Team Rainbow, which was committed to providing a safe space for our LGBTQA plus community. And at the beginning of the year, we sat down, we started planning for this, I would say, at the end of last year, just saying that there is a need for more ERGs. We identified what those 2 ERGs needs were. Blacsana was one, and Asana Pack, which is to celebrate and empower our Pan-Asian and Pacific Islander community. And then we got to planning. We just sat and figured out, hey, this is the mission of these 2 ERGs. And I think last summer definitely sped up the need for those ERGs, and also some of the in the Bay Area, some of the hate crimes that became more and more prevalent also really communicated the need to the organization that yes, we do need these groups. And so at the beginning of this year, February to be exact, we launched Blacsana and Asana Pack, which now makes 5 ERGs at Asana, which is super, super exciting.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's really exciting. And we know that there are a lot of different opportunities to create ERGs at the company as well. Dayna, what ERGs are available at your company? I know there's a ton as well.
Yeah. So I inherited 7 ERGs when I started with Blend, and those are Black at Blend, representing our Black diaspora. We have Pride at Blend, representing our LGBTQIA plus community. Parents at Blend, representing our parents and caregivers. Blend Salutes, which is our military veterans ERG. Women at Blend, representing our women and gender minorities. Blendissimo, which is for our Hispanic and Latinx communities, and Asian at Blend, which represents our diverse and multicultural Asian community. And those are the 7 ERGs that were in existence when I joined Blend back in December of last year. And we are currently in the process of chartering 3 new ERGs. Our company is growing so quickly, and those ERGs will be representing EEOC protected groups around religion, disability, and age. So we're excited about our ERG program just growing quickly.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot going on. What about you, Imani, at Zillow?
Well, Zillow has quite a robust ERG program. In total, we have 11 employee resource groups. We have the DAFT, which is our accessibility network. We have the API, which is our Asian Pacific Islander network. Billow, which is for Black diasporic folks at Zillow. We have IPN, which is for Indigenous peoples. We call it the Indigenous Peoples Network. Latinos Unidos, which is for our Latino community and allies. Pride, which is, of course, our LGBTQIA plus community. We've got parents and caregivers. We have a veterans network, a women's empowerment network, what we call ZG Over 40, which is our intergenerational network. And last but not least, we have what we are calling ZEST, and that is our environmental ERG. It's huge and massive and delightful to have so many opportunities for employees to connect in that way.
Yes, absolutely. I love the intergenerational one as well. I feel like we don't hear that a lot, but it's definitely part of the conversation. Danita, what about you as co-chair of one of the ERGs, and you're part of all of them, I know.
So we have 10. We have a pretty robust program too. And in addition to our Black employees at Ring Central, we have our Sassy Women, which is a play on software as a service, as well as our C Women in Leadership. We have our OLA group, which is our Hispanic Organization for Leadership and Advancement, or Achievement, rather. We have our Veterans group. We have an Indigenous group as well. We have our Help and Understanding group, which is for parents and caregivers, relatives, friends, and allies for people with special needs. And then we have our Generations group, which is for multi-generational households. There's quite a few of us in that group that are living with children and parents at the same time. We have our Rainbow Room, which is our LGBTQ plus community and allies. And then we have our Pan-Asian group. So we're pretty robust as well. And quite a few of these started up within the last year, and they're very active and very involved in their groups, driving initiatives and programs.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds incredible as well. There are a ton of different communities to be a part of as well. And I love that you are an ally for all of the groups as well. Speaking of just activity and, there's so many initiatives going on, and there are a lot of different goals that you can have for employee resource groups, whether it's community engagement, employee engagement, education as well for DEIB programming for folks, celebrating Heritage Months. Can you talk a little bit about, and this question is for everyone, like examples of what the goals of the employee resource group is, especially for newer employee resource groups as well, how you really define those? And I'll start with Danita for this question.
So currently, I mean, this is a really good question. We're currently in the throes of really defining our ERGs, because we have a lot of support groups that have evolved out of our ERGs that aren't necessarily ERGs that are driving, advancement and leadership, but, support groups for new parents, new moms, new dads. We have support groups for people that are interested even in design, home interiors, which would be one of mine interests. But we have so many different areas that kind of, are subsets of these ERGs. For our ERGs, though, what we're trying to do, Christina, is get a platform where they can start to create a template that helps them build budgets, builds programming, and make determinations on initiatives and strategies that would advance their platform. So helping them find their voice and then figure out how to leverage that voice within the organization through sponsorship, through meeting with executives, and bringing their initiatives to the forefront, giving them the visibility that they deserve and that they desire.
Absolutely. Visibility is important, and also supporting the goals, as we recognize they are dynamic and always changing too. Dayna, I'll pass to you next, but also want to recognize in the chat, you can always ask questions. And some folks were wondering specifically, how do you all address belonging and inclusion for employees who want to bring their religious identity to work? If you also want to address that question.
Yeah, I can do both. So the nice thing about the way that our ERG program lies within the Blend organization is that I'm a member of the Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging team. And so the inclusion programs function that I run is, embedded in DIB. And so for our ERGs, goals look differently depending on what ERG it is. We ask that our ERG leads, which we have 2 for each group, we call them co-leaders, and they work with their members to develop and foster goals that are pertinent to that group specifically, and they're around 3 thematic areas that are the core pillars of our DIB framework, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And so those pillars are talent, experience, and impact. And again, these are the core pillars of our DIB framework. They focus on investing in top talent from varying backgrounds, cultivating brave spaces so that people can fully participate and learn from one another, and then demonstrating personal and professional commitment to the organization and its values through community engagement. And you'll see some of that through the type of work that our ERGs do with our community partners and things like that. And so it's really important that inclusion and belonging just kind of lives in this space at all times. And so that's why we develop our goals the way that we do. And then also the question around religion. So one of those exciting new ERGs that I'm currently in the process of working with other members of my company to charter is an interfaith employee resource group. And so I am hoping that because that's something that I'm very interested in personally as well. And so I'm hoping that just, gets off to a great start and people are interested in being a part of that, and really currently trying to figure out ways to just kind of make that ERG pop. Because, getting our ERGs popping is a part of what I talk to the employee resource group leaders about all the time. And so we'll talk more about that later, how to get it popping. But yeah, that's a little bit about goals and what we're looking to do going forward at Blend.
No, I think that's definitely really helpful to understand, and bucketing it in those 3 topics or themes is helpful too in terms of direction. And also there's a lot of questions around measuring success, which we'll also discuss in this conversation. But Imani, I also wanted to ask your perspective too, in terms of having so many different employee resource groups and supporting their kind of programming and goals. What do you really think about the role of ERGs at Zillow Group?
So ERG goals at Zillow were created in collaboration with the ERG's executive sponsor, which is someone who sits in executive leadership at Zillow, and has said, yes, I will back this particular ERG. And that also goes into collaboration with the executive council. We have really robust leaders who sit on councils to lead the ERG forward. And that's really the seat of where their goals come from. And every year they create annual outcomes. They decide where they want to go for the year. They create the initiatives. They are incredibly autonomous and busy and love it that way. Also, Zillow culture is really adamant about bringing one's whole self to work, and our ERGs really were created in support of that belief. And so that really sits at the foundation of all of our ERGs.
Yeah, I think that note about executive sponsorship and just modeling from leadership is really important. And we're going to talk about getting executives and leaders involved in budgeting as well. Sebastian, you are a leader of Blacsana. Can you talk about some of your goals? I know we talked about in terms of just advocating for Black employees at Asana, but also allyship. And they're just, a bunch of different things there.
Yeah, totally. I think at the end of the day, I aim to remember our D&I's team's mission, which is to simply create inclusive workspaces for all, right? And so as my co-leads and I were sitting and thinking about, hey, what are our goals of this? It's really hard to quantify impact. It's really hard to quantify people's belonging. And so we wanted our goals to be a part of our mission statement. And Blacsana's mission statement is to create safe community. One, that's our first goal. How can we make sure we do have a private Slack channel for Blacsanas where they can vent, they can talk, they can share freely. So that's a safe community. We also wanted to make sure that we support their development. So we have a budget that within our Blacsana budget that is specifically for the development of our Blacsana community and allies, not just of the community, so for both the allies. And then last but not least is to celebrate your successes. That's a huge goal of ours. We want to make sure that their success is recognized in the Blacsana community, at the Asana level. We want all visibility, we want all eyes, and even externally as well. So we decided that our goals were going to be directly correlated to our mission, and our mission really came from making sure that we created this inclusive workspace for all, including Blacsana.
I think that's important as well to relate it to the business. And also, I think that relates to executive sponsorship. And you mentioned budget. Can you talk about, especially just like creating Blacsana, how you advocated for budget? Because we know you need time, money, and resources to make these things happen.
Yeah. I want to first and foremost call out that Asana is a pretty special company in the fact that I didn't really have to advocate for budget. Because of the ERGs that came before me, there was already a need to know the budget. We did not get to choose the amount by any means. However, there was a budget that was allocated to us. And so I think I want to first and foremost just say that if you are in the process right now of trying to advocate for budget, if you will, I think it's really important to understand and maybe have a little bit of a plan as to what you're going to use this budget for, right? That was really big. That's been really big for me. Yes, our ERG did come with a specific budget, but just the plan to show the organization, this is how we plan on using this particular budget. I know I'm going to have to advocate maybe for a little bit more next year because we are growing. Our ERG is growing. So I started thinking about all of these, but I will really quickly, did want to call that I didn't have to advocate. Executive sponsorship was something that was also really big as well. I know that's not exactly money, but executive sponsorship was really big for us. We have our head of business that's our exec sponsorship. He is a white man that advocates for Black employees. And that's the world I want to live in personally. And so for me, between those two things, the money and the executive sponsorship in some moments, in some days, are a little bit better than money. Okay. So those are kind of really how we advocated and how we thought about budget for the future as well.
That's the kind of world that I want to live in as well. Danita, how do you think about, as co-lead for your ERG at RingCentral and now helping plan all ERGs kind of programming and just supporting them as well, think about budget for things like this?
Well, and that's an area that we're just starting to get into, right, is executive sponsorship and budget. I think that companies have to invest and provide resources for ERGs to function effectively. This is, there's a lot of time I've been watching the questions kind of scroll up, and it's like, how do you pay people? Is it a lot of time that goes into this? Absolutely. It is like having 2 full-time jobs when you co-lead an ERG and you work in your role and you're wanting to be bring excellence to both. At least that's how I operate. So it does require a lot of time if you have a lot of initiatives. And of course, in the Black ERG, we do have a lot of initiatives that we're trying to accomplish, a lot of strategies we're wanting to drive internal advancement for employees, as well as increase our diverse professional intake of employees. So there's a lot of things that we want to bring focus to, but we also, recognize that this is new, right? And I think we were talking about this previously, some of us. DEI is not new, but because it used to be the thing that everybody did to check off a box, right? We have this many employees that are Black and this many that are Latinx and this many that fall into the gender category. But after last year with George Floyd's killing on TV and that bringing an awareness that it did, it gave ERGs a platform and a voice, I believe personally, that we didn't necessarily have before. It doesn't mean that people didn't believe in our initiatives and our strategies. It doesn't mean that there wasn't support in some companies, but I do believe we have a bigger platform and we have more people listening. So it's about galvanizing your particular ERGs. Like Sebastian said, figuring out what is important to you, right? What are the strategies you want to drive this year? You can't boil the ocean. We're not going to change it all in a year. And by the way, one or two people can't do everything. And that's any ERG. And you'll find sometimes that one or two people are doing a lot of the work, right? So you have to rally around those people if you're in those ERGs. So yes, resources, Christina, to your question. Money, resources, sponsorship, all of that is important, but it's no more important than everybody coming to the table and saying, what can I do to help? Where can I step in here? And this is what's important to me. How do we get this to the forefront? And who do we talk to? One of the things that we're looking at Ring Central is starting a diversity council where our co-leads will meet with our C-suite, hopefully. This is probably the first time anybody will have heard that. So we'll meet with our C-suite on a regular basis, on a quarterly basis, and bring those initiatives to the table, constructively with good ideas and a clear strategy on how we can implement things and drive change. But the other thing that we're doing simultaneously, and our company's putting money to, is building this purpose-led culture. Meaning it's purpose-led in what we're trying to accomplish as a company. But we recognize that each person that comes to the table has a purpose that drives them. How do we marry the purpose of the company with the purpose that brings us to work every day? And that's what creates that culture of belonging, because you feel like you own the company as well. You're always going to work harder for a place that you feel you belong to than a place that you don't feel accepted at.
Yes, absolutely. That is so important to highlight when you feel like you are being heard and you're being seen by an organization, by managers, by your peers. It produces better work overall for the business as well and for you as an individual. In terms of time, money, and resources, you mentioned that this is a full-time job for ERG leaders who, this isn't their full-time role. And we know or probably have seen LinkedIn statement around how they just announced that they're paying employee resource group leaders $10,000 additional dollars to their salary, which love to see it. Dayna, you talked about how Blend was already compensating leaders, but they're continuously looking at the budget for this. And we've had a lot of questions in the chat around compensation. Can you talk a little bit about kind of your philosophy in terms of, this evolving process of compensating people with, time, professional development, anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. I think that it is imperative to compensate ERG leaders for their work because it is work, right? And that compensation, definitely should, come in the form of monetary compensation. There are other forms of compensation that we at Blend give to our ERG leaders that we're just building upon every day, which is learning and professional development and opportunities to, be seen and heard by our leadership team. And so compensation is a motivating factor, and it emphasizes the importance of of the work that the employee resource group leaders are doing. I inherited an awesome program where I didn't have to advocate for the importance of compensating ERG leaders. And so, our leaders have been getting paid for a very long time. And I also understand that this work and this, the way that compensation looks, it's a journey. Like Danita was saying, it's funny because she just mentioned, this might be the first time somebody heard this, but this is the beauty of the work that we do. This field that we are in, there's so much growth to be done, and there's so much learning that we can get as ERG program managers and ERG leaders, that we learn from each other and we tap into our resources and our communities to hear what other people are doing. What are you doing? What are your ERGs doing? How much are your ERG leaders getting paid? What other ways do you compensate your leaders? And so, again, it's imperative that ERG leaders be compensated. If your company or your organization doesn't have, the money to pay an ERG leader $10,000 a year for their leadership, then what other ways are you compensating them? What other ways are you looking to boost them and give them professional development opportunities and set them up for success as they lead their ERGs, so that later on they can go off to take on other leadership roles within the company or organization?
Absolutely. And speaking of just sharing best practices, Imani, how do you think about really compensation for these ERG leaders at Zillow Group?
I am in full agreement that it is imperative that we compensate our leaders. Zillow Group really builds in the role of a leader into a leader's job. So that means that they have up to 10 hours per month to do this equity and belonging work. So we work with managers and HRBPs in order to make sure that they have the dedicated time to do the work, because it is literally like having a whole nother job. And we recognize that and know that it takes a lot of time out of our leaders' days. And so we really collaborate across all their supervisory spaces in order to make sure that they have that time to do the work.
I like that it's tied into just like the full-time job, and managers are aware that they're doing this, and it's not their job to manage up to share like, oh, I'm actually doing this additional job for the company. So I think that definitely makes sense. But sometimes this role of an ERG lead does turn into a full-time job. Danita, that you mentioned that you came into this role pretty recently in terms of a full-time role, and you were in finance beforehand. Could you tell us a little bit about what that process was like when they asked you to fill this role as global lead?
It's my dream come true. We talked about what we wanted to be when we grow up. And so it's taken me many moons to figure out this is what I want to be. Like, I've landed in exactly the space where my purpose has collided with the time that we found ourselves in. But nothing was wasted, right? So those years spent in finance ops and in client relationship and in strategic outsourcing, global services, I've done everything in tech. But all of that has led to this moment, right? It's equipped me and it's given me skills that I've brought into this role. And I have tremendous support from our C-suite, right? I work directly and report to our CPO, Gunjan, and she is so supportive of and just innovative, right? Like, what ideas do you have? Like, so how do you see this HBCU program working? And you tell her, and then it's like, okay, go build it, and then let's talk about it, and let's, when you have people that say to you, if it's not Gunjan, it's Anna, we want to equip this program so that it succeeds. That they're invested in seeing that DEI succeeds within the company. So the transition has been exciting. It's still kind of nebulous. I think I said that the other day too. So it's like, what's going to come up out of this, what's going to form out of this? But I love that, right? Because it's a creative space. I love being in a place where you get to put your fingerprint or your thumbprint on something and you get to make it effective. You're accountable for what you do. You've got to bring your A game, and you've got to make something happen for others, not just African Americans, but Latinx, for women. You've got to drive this whole URM initiative, but you've got to build a sense of belonging for the people that are already there. So there's an external and an internal component to it, Christina. that you have to learn how to balance. And I have to really step back sometimes because I dream big. So I have to step back sometimes and say, okay, that's really heavy leaning toward the external. Don't forget the people that are already here, that have invested their time, that have put in, all of their energy to driving the success of this company. How do we bring them into the mix as well? So having support from your leaders, I think is critical to the success of, we know it's critical to the success of any program, but it is exceptionally critical in driving diversity, equity, and inclusion in any company. And I'm glad to have it.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's imperative for all companies. And also, I think a common thread throughout the conversation, too, is that diversity, equity, and inclusion, our employee resource group, shouldn't be siloed into this part of the business. It should be part of all processes and really embedded in that and in decision making as well. It's everybody's responsibility. Dayna, I know we talked about just the role of inclusion program leaders. For folks who aren't familiar, for employee resource groups, you might attend events as someone in just like programming, but can you talk a little bit more about what you mentioned earlier for leadership development of chairs in addition to compensation and what your philosophy is there?
Sure. So one of the things that I'm happy to say is that when I went about this work in a very interesting way, and so starting out as an elementary school teacher, and then working through my career in just really knowing not much else other than being a teacher, not knowing that the L&D world was a thing, and then kind of moving into learning and development and discovering that passion, and then finally finding myself, like Danita said, on this journey, and then ending up exactly where I am today. It makes me really happy because it's kind of like a culmination of all of the learning work that I've been doing all of these years. And so working with ERG leaders and, just having those one-on-one relationships where we can thought partner and where I can meet with them one-on-one, or Dayna plus the two co-leads meet to talk about, AAPI month that's coming up, or what are we going to do for Pride? And we meet monthly. I meet with all of the leads monthly together, and we do leadership activities and workshop on onboarding is very important to me for incoming ERG leaders, that they are being set up for success in a way that is going to help them not only as ERG leaders for their 6-month term, but just ongoing opportunities. And another part of the DIB team's function is to provide those learnings and enhance our culture of belonging by building connections and strengthening interpersonal skills. And so we've got DIB learning journeys that are just, they speak to what employee resource group leaders need to know, and some skills and tools that they need to put in their toolboxes so that they can thrive. And so, being able to just kind of make those connections, it's a really advantageous role that I'm in, because being a part of the DIB team, leading inclusion programs, and then also having this L&D background, it really just, it all goes hand in hand, because everything is a learning opportunity. Every time I meet with ERG leaders, I want to find out, what they need, how I can help them. And I'm honored to have the position as the program manager, because I get to see the work that they're all doing collectively. And then that way, we got 7 groups, we're about to be 10, right? So it's really, really cool, because something that this group is doing might not be working that great, but guess what? Dayna's a fly on the wall in, all of the ERG happenings. And so then I could, take this from that group and say, Black at Blend did this. maybe you should try that out, or Asian at Blend did this, and Pride did this the other time, or maybe you guys can collaborate and do this. And it all goes together. And so, yeah, that professional development, that thought partnership, and that collaboration is really, really, really important. And if your company or organization has an opportunity to have a person in a role that is responsible solely for ERG program management, jump on that, because it is really important. It's work, and they need the support. The leaders need the support.
Yeah, they absolutely need the support. And what we've been continually talking about is how to set ERGs up for success. But I also want to highlight that ERGs really set a company up for success too, in terms of employee engagement, employer brand, retention, all of these things, psychological safety. Sebastian, this question is for you, because in our kind of conversation, you talked about the Slack channel for Black employees at Asana. There's like around 52 out of 1,500, and it's growing every week. Can you tell us about how ERGs really contribute to, the overall mission of Asana?
Yeah, first and foremost, it was at 52 last week. We are at 55 today.
Yes.
We celebrated, we went crazy, and we will continue to celebrate and go crazy while we have and continue to get Black people into the tech industry. So for me, I've always said this, and I continue to say this, as to like why ERGs are important. Or listen, wherever I can show up, be seen, heard, valued, and respected, my innovation, my creativity, and my feeling of belonging will always be present. And so I feel that that's the main job of ERGs at Asana, right? It also or at any organization, really. And for me, Asana talks a really good talk, and ERGs is one really amazing way that Asana has put the talk to the walk. They have walked a really, really amazing walk, and I feel that that was one of the ways in which we did that. And so every company wants to be diverse, and they love the buzzwords, and they love that, and that's great and all. But if I can't fully show up as my authentic whole self, my Black, gay, man self, then I don't necessarily want to be there. And I think that's the role that ERGs tremendously play in those organizations.
Yes, Imani, what do you think about this in terms of Zillow Group and how ERGs contribute to company culture, psychological safety, and just the overall mission of?
Yeah, Sebastian, I am in full agreement that ERGs play a really crucial role in engagement and retention, psychological safety, and the way that the company's employer brand works. And so our ERGs really provide a safe space for members and allies to come together, right? That's the role of the ERG, is to really build a bridge, and also to celebrate their community and really get a chance to have courageous conversations about important issues and build virtual engagement opportunities, as we are a distributed workforce still. And so members across the country can connect and get to know one another. Our employer brand team is also completely on board. And so they work really, really closely with our team, the EMB team, and the leaders of our ERGs in order to amplify their work on our social channels and to build awareness of all the great work that our ERGs are doing. When I tell you that they are such a large portion of our EMB team, it would be an understatement. Without them, that safe space wouldn't exist. And so we really work together as a company to make sure that those voices get heard, they get seen, and people know that they're available for them.
Yes, I think that's so important. And, the thing of measuring belonging, inclusion, bringing your full self to work, it's kind of intangible at times. You need that qualitative data. And some of the folks in the chat were asking as well how you really measure success for all of these different initiatives, knowing that different goals obviously have different KPIs. Dayna, I'll start off with you. Can you share a little bit of just examples of how you can track progress or even lack thereof progress?
Yeah. So one of the ways that I measure success is by monitoring our Slack channels. So each of our ERGs has a dedicated Slack channel. It's the primary form of communication for our ERGs. And I remember I was talking earlier about, getting the Slack channels popping. And so I laugh when I say that because I was in an ERG meeting, one of my very first ERG meetings at Blend earlier this year. And that was like the focus of our conversation. And somebody said that and it just stuck with me. So if the Slack channels are popping, we're probably doing something right. If people are in the Slack channels and they are joining, because that's how they join ERG, we make it really, really easy. In order to join any of our ERGs, and anyone can join any ERG, all you have to do is join the Slack channel and you are in there. And so joining, tuning in, having conversations, people being engaged in the conversations that are going on in the Slack channels and responding to the things that people share in there, and then sharing with one another and engaging in this remote world that we're still in. The Slack is very important. Making sure that people are actually attending and learning, attending the learning opportunities that the ERGs provide and the events that they have, whether it be reading a book together during a given month and then having a discussion about it later, a paint and sip, doing a virtual wine tasting, attending a dance party for the company that's sponsored by one or two of our ERGs. It's all important in knowing that they're making a difference by just seeing how people are interacting, how people are responding to the events and that people are coming. Also that executive sponsors are engaging with their ERGs and taking suggestions and bringing those ideas and suggestions to company leadership is another measure of success.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to just look at these pillars of success and also recognize that they can change over time too. Just because you meet one doesn't mean you're one and done and you've met the goals and you have to keep working on it. And speaking of Slack channels, I'm going to go back to Blacsana. Sebastian, you mentioned in our conversation, you're really focused on the growth, flourishment, and belonging of Black employees at Asana, as well as inviting allies to participate. And that's a world I want to live in as well. Can you tell us your perspective on what kind of programs and events should be safe spaces for Black employees and what programming is really for everyone, what the difference is there for folks who aren't aware?
Yeah, totally. I think first and foremost, it's like really helpful to know these ERGs sometimes are tailored to specific groups. And I think we live in a very call out culture. And something that I've really been shifting my mind to is from call out to call in. Right? Like I'm inviting these people into these conversations, right? Allies is what some call, like I get to call you into some of these really hard conversations. I think some of the tangible ways that Asana has done that is we've had really hard conversations. Last summer was a very hard year for some of us. As a Black man, I couldn't show up most of last summer, right? I just moved to a brand new city. Police brutality has showed up in my family directly. And so watching that is kind of reliving that trauma for me again. So showing up last summer was really, really hard. And having that conversation with other Asanas was really uncomfortable. But it's also really uncomfortable when I get pulled over by a police officer and not really sure if I'm going to make it out of that conversation alive. So that wasn't necessarily an option. So for me, we created those spaces. What is the experience like being Black in tech, right? I shared with the group I shared with my other fellow ERG leads this morning, just like showing up in conversations with white men specifically and feeling like I have to make sure that they know I'm educated, that I come from a good home, and that I belong in that particular situation. Like, what the hell is that, right? Like, that's really exhausting, if you will. So I think for me, it was just more or less making sure it's always been for a priority of Asana to show up to the conversation. I don't need you to have words, right? Most of the times I don't have words. I just need you to show up to the conversation. And if you feel so inclined to share, please do that. There's also really good, like fun moments as well where, Juneteenth is coming up. We have last year really focused really heavily on just spotlighting some of the importance around Juneteenth, what the heck Juneteenth actually is. So there's the fun activities that happen as well. Black History Month, we had all kinds of programming that were super fun, but I want to call out that even in the really fun moments, we also have to create spaces for the really hard conversations as well. I do not want us to ever miss that the really hard conversations is really where connection, growth, and I really think community is formed and built.
Yes, if you want to show up for the fun stuff, you got to show up for the hard conversations as well for that full experience. And I do want to recognize that June is, we're celebrating Juneteenth, and a lot of corporations are offering a day off for employees or an active day on for learning. And I want to ask everyone how they are acknowledging Juneteenth at their company, and, you know, if it's programming, resources, hard conversations. Imani, I'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So last year, the EMB team really advocated for Juneteenth as a company observed holiday, with an emphasis on time to further develop EMB skills. So it's very, let's take time to educate ourselves while you have a day off. So do something with your day off. And this year it will be observed, and employees are really encouraged to access the resources that have been made available via our communications team and also the Billow network, and to really use that time to deepen their knowledge and experience over the holiday, which is really exciting. And I'm grateful that Zillow said yes to that.
Danita, how are you celebrating Juneteenth at Ring Central?
So last year, when everything happened, Ring Central immediately, like within 2 weeks, and it had to be less than 2 weeks because George Floyd was murdered on May 25th. And Juneteenth is what, almost 3 weeks to the day, right? So in that time period, and I would say within 2 weeks, our leadership made a declaration that Juneteenth would be an official U.S. company holiday. So we had the day off. And because of the short runway last year, you know, we just kind of celebrated Juneteenth. We asked everybody, like Imani was saying, to go out, educate yourself, and not just educate, because honestly, this is a day of celebration. I mean, it took 2 years for these Civil War soldiers, the Union soldiers, to get to Texas and tell the people in Galveston they were free. So they still were working, 2 years after they were free. So, but it was a celebration, right? So go out there's so many celebratory events that happen in all these cities. Go do something and learn about Juneteenth, learn something about Black history. But because it's an official holiday, I mean, it's on the books. So we will take it, every year from now on. But then I heard yesterday on the news that the Senate passed it unanimously. The House is supposed to pass it. This is long overdue. Everyone should be acknowledging it and recognizing it. And I am just so honored to be here at Ring Central where we're doing that. We have, of course, it's Pride Month. So we have a ton of activities for Pride. And so with Juneteenth, we took yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and we're doing different events. Today we had a block party. Yesterday it was about sharing our blog about Juneteenth out on the internet. And for every share, we would give money to the Legacy Museum and Memorial in Alabama. And then tomorrow we've got an African-American chef coming in, and he's going to cook with us and make shrimp and grits. And oh my God, I cannot wait till tomorrow because I love shrimp and grits. So we're doing fun things to celebrate it, but we're also sharing educational information on films and books and just things that you can do in your city to learn more about Juneteenth. So I just think it's imperative that companies not only support Juneteenth, but that you rally around your diverse professionals. And we celebrated Ramadan when our Muslim population was celebrating Ramadan, rally around one another and support them in the things that make them feel whole and make them feel like they belong. And that's why Juneteenth is special here at Ring Central, because the company has really made a declaration to do that. And I'm so appreciative.
Yes, rally around your employees. Dayna, what are you doing at Blend?
Well, we are off on Friday. We are observing Juneteenth on Friday, and we've initiated a company-wide day of service for those who choose to honor Juneteenth in that way, and encouraging folks to, just honor the holiday, honor the day in the way that they see, fitting for themselves. But there is definitely an encouragement for folks to get out there in their communities. We've suggested different opportunities for people to go and do some volunteer work. I'm going to be volunteering for an organization in Washington, D.C. that's called Martha's Table, that's near and dear to my heart. And then on Monday, we have a mental health day. So we have a 4-day weekend for Juneteenth. Very excited about that. And then leading up to Juneteenth, one of our educational opportunities that I'll highlight, because it's always important to kind of give folks the foundation, right? We had a speaker come in, Dr. Sylvia Herrera, and she came into our Blendissimo monthly meeting and talked about the significance of Juneteenth for the Hispanic and Latinx culture out there in Texas. And so that was really, really great. And so I hope that as we move forward and continue celebrating Juneteenth, we will be able to provide more learning opportunities, because I think that's really, really important, so that people know, oh, we don't just have the day off. This is why we are honoring this day, and this is the importance of this day to us.
Yeah, that foundation is critical, and just those different moving pieces of understanding, celebrating, and doing the work with a capital W. Sebastian, what's Asana up to?
Yeah, so last year, just like many of, we really held tons of space on our external channel. So it was like really broadcasting externally some of the importance of these conversations, also amplifying the voices of our Black employees. This year, we are going to be sending spice kits, right? Like we decided to kind of focus on one region. We're going to send spice kits to all, through most Asanas. We do not have the day off yet. But next year we are believing for bigger things like days off, but structured days off where we will serve our community.
I love that. That's so creative. I feel like we could have this conversation for another hour, because there's so much to talk about, and there was a lot of different questions. You can find a lot of our panelists on LinkedIn and on the internet. But I wanted to leave time for one piece of advice from everybody for employee resource group leaders. A lot of the folks who are joining are either starting ERGs or, thinking about ways to rework them as well. So if everyone can share one piece of advice, and I'm going to share a piece of advice and throw my 2 cents in as a former employee resource group leader and say, know your worth, know your worth, know your worth, because you should be compensated for all of the work you're doing, whether it's in a salary increase, professional development, executive time. It's another job. So you should definitely advocate for yourself. Sebastian, I'll pass to you for your next.
Yeah, I love that. Mine is one of my favorite quotes, right? And we'll break it down, but it just says like the creator or the universe has not given you a longing to do which you have no ability to do. There's 2 pieces I want to focus in on there. The first is to remember why you're doing this. There are people who are at stake, right? There are belonging areas. There are places in which people will feel safe because of the work that you do. So please continue to do it. We have to have it. And the second place is the creator or the universe has not given you. Take care of you. You are just as important to this work as the work that is being done. And you need to prioritize yourself in really on any facet. So best of luck to all of you who are just getting started or 10 years on the road. Thank you for all the work that you do.
Yes, +1. Imani, what's your advice?
My advice is there's always time for play. ERGs are a really huge reason why employees are connected to company culture, and education and play go hand in hand. So make time for play.
Yes. Dayna, what's your advice?
Well, I loved Yetta's comment in the chat right now. Remember your why. Thank you for that, Yetta. My piece of advice is to don't do it alone. So just to everyone out there who is looking to take this on, thought partner, talk to other people, continue joining conversations like this, and then reaching out to the folks who might be able to help you along the way. We are here to support you. And I think that the reason that this space is so beautiful is because we all support one another, and we're learning together again, and just lean into that. And don't do it alone. Reach out to other people at your company or your organization to help you stand these programs up, because again, it is work, and people are out there who have the same goals and the same beliefs as you do as far as supporting ERGs.
Yes, you are not alone. Danita, what are your words of wisdom?
Oh my gosh, I have so many. Don't boil the ocean because you can't. But don't give up, right? There are going to be days that you're going to get discouraged. It is hard work. Some days it's going to be just you who shows up. But you know what? You do it. Because if it makes a difference for one, then why you showed up has already been answered. And I think you have to make certain that you take care of yourself, because you can easily get burnt out trying to resolve everything, and make sure that everything's done the way it needs to be done. I am a person that believes in doing all things in excellence, so that's a strength and a weakness, right? Because I have a tendency to be very hard on myself, but I like to make sure, and not because I want people to think, oh my, look at what she did, but I just think that's, you come correct or you don't come at all. So you do your best, you bring your best to the table, and if things don't work out, don't beat yourself up. You just dust yourself off, pick up, and then tomorrow's a new day. You learn from those places and you keep going on, because you are making a difference. It may not seem like you are, but you are chipping away at something that we did not have an opportunity to chip away at, probably, I would say, 5 years ago. Not the way that we have the opportunity now.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a great call to action to end on. Prioritize yourself. Also know that you are making a difference in all of this work. Thank you so much to all of our panelists, Sebastian, Dayna, Danita, and Imani, for spending this afternoon with us. That's all the time we have for our panel discussion. I really appreciate it and was taking some notes along the way as well. And as a reminder for folks who aren't familiar with AllVoices, we truly believe in the value of employee feedback to build this really inclusive culture of belonging. And we also believe in psychological safety at the workplace, and really promoting that feedback can come from anyone within an organization for folks to succeed. If you have any questions, let me know. But other than that, we will talk soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.